As much as I would love to no longer have to speak on transgender people, on misogyny, on violence against women, there lies a constant trend of violence against women being excused because the perpetrator is a man, is trans, or is both. Today, I'd like to continue a series documenting the disturbing trail of true crime committed by those in the trans community. This is not to bully or to pick out the worst of the worst as examples, it is merely to show you the hypocrisy of the law and society's treatment of criminals who identify as such, and to raise awareness. Far too often, they find themselves forgiven, forgotten, or placed into positions of power, and it is only through spreading knowledge of what they have done that we can do anything to combat this. Trans Uniting is a mutual aid nonprofit, providing resources to Pittsburgh trans community. The organization is led by Dena Stanley, a prominent social justice warrior against the Black trans community. The organization is trans, non-binary, and gender-expansive people working to better the community's lives in Pittsburgh. As read directly from their website, Trans Uniting centers Black, trans, and gender-expansive lives by providing a number of resources, including offering crisis housing to trans people who face homelessness or displacement from their homes, food assistance, as well as partnering with Proud Haven to create a space and community for LGBTQIAP youth. Okay, sorry. I was looking at the P like, what is that? And I remembered the alphabet keeps growing every time I read it. Anyway, in connecting trans people to resources with our numerous community partners. At first glance, this organization seems like any other regional nonprofit, if a little specific. However, the CEO and founder, Dena Stanley, a 36-year-old trans-identified male, has a surprisingly violent history. On October 29, 2020, Dena Stanley drove to a residence on Beaver Road in Ambridge and began fighting a 15-year-old. The child's mother, a lesbian named Cecilia Melvin, told reporters, "I hit Stanley with a brick to get her off my 15-year-old child. When they dropped to the ground, my son said he can't see, he couldn't breathe. He has asthma very, very bad." This occurred after Miss Melvin realized her 15-year-old and 7-year-old children had been pepper sprayed and rushed them into the home to wash out their eyes. "I heard a big boom and I heard glass shattering everywhere, and my 10-month-old baby was laying there and glass was all over my baby," Miss Melvin said. Prior to the incident, the minors had not met Mr. Stanley, who is reportedly the uncle of minors involved in a conflict with the teen. This case seems pretty cut and dry. Man arrives at residence, fights a young teenager, pepper sprays 2 children, and sends a brick sailing through their window, nearly hitting an infant child. By all accounts, this person should not be in charge of any organization, let alone one that is meant to service marginalized communities. And yet, police say Mr. Stanley insists that he was defending himself from an anti-transgender hate crime. He claims he was subjected to slurs. "They called me a man and a he-she. I was thrown to the ground and bricked in the head. I was fearful for my life." Because, obviously, being called what you are is equivalent to violence towards children. If anyone in the situation was to fear for their lives, it would be the children that he assaulted and their mother. And yet, somehow, Mr. Stanley still insisted that he was the victim and managed to crowdfund medical and legal expenses. The cry that he was victimized due to his transgender status was especially hurtful to Miss Melvin, who stated that "the idea of me hating and targeting this person because they are transgender is BS. It gets me really upset," she said. "It hurts. It really hurts because I fought my whole life that when people found out I was gay, they targeted me because I was gay. I would never do that to anybody or want anybody to feel that way." This, in particular, doesn't surprise me. Lesbians have always been targeted by the modern trans community and are often considered with suspicion due to a belief that we are more likely to be TERFs or trans-exclusionary radical feminists. Perhaps this is because we are women, and the notion of us having boundaries is an antithesis of gender ideology. If you spend any time online, you'll notice a trend of individuals attempting to lessen or get out of consequences by stating their LGBT status. Even when they themselves do not draw attention to it, defenders will rise out of the ether to ensure that no one is being transphobic regardless of their crime. Chris Chan, for example, whose big-name YouTubers danced around, refusing to call him a man in the aftermath of raping his own mother. Instead, they insisted that all commentators should refer to him as she, her, validating him even as he was arrested. This trend continues here as despite several accounts from victims and multiple independent witnesses that Stanley drove to the house and began the altercations with the kids, Stanley appears to have had no true consequences. He pleaded no contest to misdemeanor charges of simple assault, and in exchange, prosecutors withdrew 13 felony and misdemeanor charges. He remained in charge of the organization, where he remains today despite yet another altercation. On June 21st, 2020, Stanley entered the 941 saloon, declaring, "I own this city," and telling the manager she had 24 hours to change the dress code, or we will shut this business down, burn this place to the ground, and blow out all the windows. This was in response to a new dress code policy, which led to 2 individuals being asked to leave the day prior. This dress code forbids tank tops, bare midriffs, sleeveless shirts, bandanas, hoodies, sweatpants, baggy pants, military or construction boots, cutoffs, and athletic jerseys without collars, amongst other styles, which, of course, was claimed to be racist and transphobic. Tell me how race or the Gender You Play Act has anything to do with following rules. A public pool will require you to wear bathing suits to comply with a specific regulation. Restaurants have dress codes and will even turn you away if you do not fit them. It is the discretion of a business to determine what dress code they would like their patrons to meet, and if you don't like it, well, you can easily go somewhere else. You are not being forced to break the dress code or discriminated against because of some immutable quality. Racism would be if the business said no braids or dreadlocks. Transphobia would be if the business required all men to wear pants and all women to wear dresses, and would play into sexism as well. All 941 Saloon asked was to avoid wearing street-style clothing. In retaliation, on June 24th, a crowd of 200 protesters assembled on Liberty Avenue outside 941 Saloon, effectively shutting down Liberty Avenue for hours. After attempting and failing to enter the bar, protesters trapped 10 employees inside as they duct taped and tied several pieces of cloth to the front door, preventing all persons inside the building to escape. Protesters jumped on security vehicles that were parked outside and stabbed the vehicle's tires. For about 30 minutes, the crowd chanted outside the bar's entrance, "Burn it down, burn it down," according to 911 calls placed by several employees from inside the establishment. In the aftermath, Mr. Stanley was arrested on charges of criminal conspiracy and terroristic threat. Aside from his position on Trans Uniting, Mr. Stanley is the president of the Transgender United Chapter Pittsburgh and a board member of the Delta Foundation of Pittsburgh. And just as he had crowdfunded for expenses beforehand, Stanley once again counts on the support of the transgender community and its allies. You might expect some repercussions from not 1, but 2 instances of violence resulting in his arrest. You would be wrong. The organizations he is involved with support him fully. The organization Pittsburgh Protest claimed in a statement, "Local black trans activist Dena is being targeted. Dena is a freedom fighter, and she shows us how to fight. She protests for an end to state violence against black trans people. She protests for safety, for freedom, for equality. We must rally around her now. Give now to support her legal costs. Give now to show police that they cannot isolate her from her support networks." For a community that claims to be harmless, that claims not to shelter predators and to support and uplift women and other members of the LGBT community, Stanley sure makes a bad example. Not only did he harass and injure literal children, but he consistently participates in acts of violence. As the face of several LGBT organizations, one would think that they would rush to disown him. After all, most jobs would be unwilling to keep an employee on with such a rap sheet, and yet the community did not. In both counts, they supported him financially, revealing what a lot of us already knew. The trans community is either unwilling or unable to address the violence and coercion in their own communities. Everyone is so tied up in not offending anyone and lifting up the correct voices that they hardly think about what it is they are supporting. Either that, or these people are perfectly fine with a man who fights children speaking for them. I'm not sure which is more concerning. And this, dear viewers, is where we part. I am aware that some of these stories are on the older side, but these are things that I basically stumble upon and realize, wow, I had heard no one talk about this. And I want to share them with you because of that. These are stories that I find incredibly touching and I think have not received nearly enough attention. Especially because, in particular, I feel like we're getting very racially divided, not just in general, but in the radical feminist community. And I also feel like that goes for the general lib-fem community, the Gendy fandom as well. They always try to use race as this, like the more oppressed you are, the more oppression points you hold, the more power you hold. And while I have seen less examples of black trans women and, genders of color doing things, I think part of that is just that they're not getting as much news coverage. So this is what I learned. This is an incredibly just wow story. The police officers who worked on this case were surprised that people, after several witnesses saying he attacked literal children, still supported him. Like, it's wild. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you have any suggestions for any cases I've missed out on, anything you want to add, anything at all, questions, concerns, whatever, leave them down below. As you know, I pretty much respond to every single comment all of the time because this is like one little small community and I recognize all of your usernames. So yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.